What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, August 11th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. And Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Before I get into the news, remember I have told you on many occasions that it's a really good exercise when you're watching politicians make their speeches on TV to turn the sound off. Stop listening to their words and just look at their faces. And it can be quite revealing. And I mention that because not too long ago they had Hillary Clinton up making one of her canned speeches to this union group, you know, about how Donald Trump does this and Donald Trump does that and the rest of it. And it was interesting studying her face because up until recently, every time she talks, she's got that smirk on her face. She knows the White House is hers. Today, it wasn't there. It was very obvious to me. She knows she's in trouble. She knows she does not have a lock on the White House, and a lot of people are very worried. And the corporate media is still out there saying, oh, well, you know, Hillary is, you know, got a 4-digit lead on Donald Trump, you know, so don't bother showing up to vote for him on Election Day. It's a hopeless case. But every poll that is being run that is not connected with a corporate media outlet has Donald Trump winning in a landslide. And we still have 80-plus days before the election for more revelations about Hillary to come on out, and they're already in a panic over that. So let's get into the news here. Right now, thanks to Judicial Watch, and remember I did say my nickel was on them rather than the FBI to come up with stuff, there are 3 new reports out on Hillary Clinton. One of them we already talked about the other day, where Judicial Watch has found another 44 email exchanges, that were not given back to the State Department. These are work-related email exchanges that Hillary did not turn over, proving once again she did lie when she said she turned over all the work-related emails to the State Department, where they would be subject to public records laws. And these emails were not. Now, Hillary's people are already out there saying that was a mistake. She was careless. She was forgetful. She was negligent. And they don't seem to understand. They're painting a portrait of somebody who really should not be in the Oval Office. Forgetful, negligent, careless, brain short circuits, poor grip on reality, and according to Huma Abedin, confused. And more of this stuff is coming on out, saying that there's been special influence. It's not a suspicion anymore. They're documented cases. One of them involves George Soros, who was literally issuing directives to Hillary Clinton and the State Department regarding the politics of Albania. And it looks like Soros basically engineered the Balkan Wars in order to make himself rich, which is why anybody starts a war. We're going to get rich. We're going to make money. And there are articles up there showing what George Soros told Secretary of State Clinton to do, followed up by a news article showing exactly it did happen. Now, there are new emails that have come on out showing just how tight the ties were between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department. One of the email exchanges between Abedin and Cheryl Mills was to set up a meeting with a State Department official and somebody who had just given a lot of money to the Clinton Foundation. They were buying access, pay to play. And there's nothing new about that. The Bill Clinton administration was doing exactly the same thing for seats on those commerce trade missions. Congress was investigating. They were about to indict Commerce Secretary Ron Brown when he very conveniently died in a suspicious plane crash here. CNN's Cuomo is out there saying the Clinton Foundation emails show coordination between the Clinton Foundation and state, and it's wrong. And yes, it is. The Clinton Foundation is not a government agency. They're not supposed to have any access whatsoever. Now, I want to go back and hit a story that we mentioned a little bit earlier in the week, but it's worth remembering. This version of it is over at Vice.com. And they're talking about just how the FBI investigation into Hillary's email server began. And it began with what is called a Section 811 referral from the Intelligence Community's Inspector General. And the ICIG determined that classified national security information in Clinton's emails on her private server might have been compromised and shared with a foreign power or an agent of a foreign power. Section 811 of the Intelligence Authorization Act is statutory authority that governs coordination of counter-espionage investigations between executive branch departments or agencies and the FBI. In other words, the FBI's investigation into Hillary's email server began as an espionage investigation. And like Title 18, does not require criminal intent, could be negligence, could be recklessness, or something else. And obviously my concern is with that something else, based on the Chinagate scandal back in 1996. Now, as I mentioned before, the Democrats are absolutely terrified that there's going to be another email leak surfacing before November. Either somebody leaks internally, or Judicial Watch is able to pry more information loose. And they're very, very scared. Apparently, Seth Rich really reminded them that a lot of their own people are not happy with what they're doing. So maybe the Democratic Party will just play it safe and drop barbells onto the throats of all of their staff now, just to prevent any more leaks coming on out. Because, hey, it's only 80-some-odd days left to the election. They can do without those staffers, and they're just taking up space and money anyway. All righty. A lot of attention still being paid to the dead bodies list, and it's rather interesting. All of a sudden, we're starting to see more and more foreign corporate media paying attention to it. And they're all taking the appropriate cautious line. We don't really know. We know what the official story is. We know in many cases it doesn't make sense. And there are simply too many of these bodies for it all to be just coincidence. Now, over on social media, there has been a flood of Facebook posts and tweets saying that there has to be a thorough investigation into these 6 recent deaths of people who were inconvenient to Hillary Clinton. And not just have somebody come on out and say, oh, it was a robbery and the robbers are stupid because they forgot to take the wallet and the watch and the cell phone, but we're absolutely convinced it was a robbery and it could not possibly be anything else. And anybody suggesting that Seth Rich was assassinated for being the WikiLeaks source is just a tinfoil hat, kook, wingnut conspiracy theorist and should be shunned by all polite society. Now, Donald Trump came out with a comment, and it was dramatic, where he basically came on out and said that President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are responsible for the formation of ISIS. And the media just went, wow, how could you say that, Obama? You know, ISIS is our enemy, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is we know it's true. We've got declassified State Department documents showing that President Obama and then Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton were smuggling weapons from Libya to Syria to give to ISIS and al-Qaeda to use against Bashar al-Assad. ISIS works for the U.S. government. And we posted this little video where Barack Obama actually made a goof when he was making a speech and said, we're training ISIL. Whoopsie. Now, we have another video by Luke Rudkowski, who's talking to U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who's a Hillary Clinton supporter, about the documents that came out showing that ISIS was created by the U.S. And she didn't deny that it was done, but said it was just an accident. Hillary gets confused. It's just an accident. She only accidentally created ISIS. Another sterling recommendation for occupying the Oval Office. So we're digging on back here in handthebankers.com, a flashback story, talking about Nabil Naim, the founder of the Islamic Democratic Jihad Party and a former top al-Qaeda commander, told Pan-Arab TV station Al Mayadeen that all current al-Qaeda affiliates, including ISIS, work for the Central Intelligence Agency. It's a covert proxy army. Now, another article coming on out from WillNet Daily, another flashback, revealing that the U.S. was training the Islamists who then joined ISIS at a secret base in Jordan. Hillary Clinton's former employer, Lafarge, is alleged to have been funding ISIS. It was all a manufactured enemy, like Emmanuel Goldstein. So, now, Julian Assange has pointed out, especially after the DNC email leak, that she's basically gone back to Senator Joseph McCarthy's playbook. Anybody who's an opponent of her has to be an agent of a foreign government. Oh, you're a commie. You don't agree with me. You're a commie. You're working for the Russians. You're doing that. And in McCarthy's era, it worked because the American people had been totally brainwashed to wet themselves whenever they heard commies or Russians. Oh, the Russians are coming. Take my money. Take my children. Protect me, Big Daddy government. That really doesn't work anymore because those of us old enough to remember the old Cold War know it was a big steaming pile of bovine excrement, and the younger generation, the millennials, grew up without that brainwashing in the school to make them reflexively hate the Russians. So they're not getting traction. People aren't just automatically buying, oh, the Russians hacked the DNC emails and the Russians are going to hack the November elections, which is a big thing they're pushing right now. Forgetting that the electronic voting machines work on memory cards, not the Internet, making it impossible for Russia to hack our elections. Very easy for the poll workers and the election workers to do it. It's set up that way. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a quick phone call. Steve in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you were talking about ISIS and ISIL. Of course, we know we created that, just like we created al-Qaeda. You know, I was thinking about that because that is our excuse to invade every country we want to. We just got to say we're chasing terrorists and go into their country. And, of course, we overthrow their governments after that and steal their resources.
Yes.
So I was thinking about the illegal immigration of Mexico coming in here. They're all using the excuse of the drug lords and the cartels there and that the government can't stop them. Well, if that's true, and maybe the part of that is true, we could surely take care of that problem. And Mexico invites us in. We send our military, and we combat them just like we're combating any hostile terrorist group and take back control and hand the control back over to Mexico. But we know that's an excuse, and Mexico likes the excuse because they can't take care of their own people. So they encourage the illegal migration to the United States.
Well, they actually go one step further. They're pulling the same thing that Castro did when the U.S. allowed Cuban immigration briefly, went down to his prisons, emptied them out, put them on the border, and shoved them on over. Let them be the U.S. Responsibility. That's why there is such a high per capita criminal element of all these illegals coming into this country.
Yeah, we could surely take care of that problem. If we could take on the drug cartels, we could do that. We could stop that in a heartbeat. People take back their government over there and stay there and work and build their infrastructure. But, there's so many thieves in Mexican government, more so probably than ours, that they just can't take care of their people. So
I'm not sure I would agree with that. In fact, if you look at Fast and Furious, you had the drug lords running the U.S. government giving military-style weapons to the drug lords running the Mexican government to wipe out competing drug cartels and create monopolies which drive up profits here. And so I would say probably both Mexico and the United States are almost equal in terms of the degree to which governments have been completely corrupted by drug money.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the news here, there was a big stink over the fact that the father of the Orlando shooter was seen sitting behind the podium, behind Hillary Clinton at one of her speeches, and he's out there saying he was invited. Somebody invited him to be there, and, of course, the Hillary campaign is saying, no, that's ridiculous. We would never do that. Okay, how did he get past the Secret Service to sit up there on the stage? Now, more and more people are concerned about Hillary's medical condition. And we do want to walk a very fine line here. There are certain medical conditions that should not be an issue. Again, Kennedy's back injury, Roosevelt's polio, they were hidden from the American people. But in both cases, their minds were perfectly okay. And the job of the president is to make decisions. That's it. In the case of Hillary Clinton, though, there is a concern that her illness does involve her mental capacity. And again, we have that email, official U.S. State Department email from Huma Abedin to staffers, reminding them that Hillary gets confused and she needs to be handheld when she's talking to foreign leaders. That's not exactly a sterling recommendation to be President of the United States of America. So somebody put up a video of Hillary Clinton's severe coughing fits. And everybody coughs from time to time, but in her case, it does seem to be rather serious. A lot of people are talking about that latest photo of Hillary being held up so she wouldn't fall over. And it's very obvious there's a gentleman to her right who's got her hand and his other hand is on her elbow. And some sharp-eyed people pointed out you can see another hand from somebody who's standing behind her propping up her other elbow. Now, you contrast this with Donald Trump, who's running all over the stage and jumping and climbing stairs, and he's the picture of health. And it is a very strong area of concern. Now, Hillary Clinton is 68 years old, and were she healthy, would not require help going up steps or standing up to speak. Yes, campaigns are very strenuous, but doesn't seem to be affecting Donald Trump. But she's had a lot of these falls and accidents. Back in 2005, she fainted during a lunch in Buffalo, New York. 2009, she broke her right elbow when she fell in a State Department garage. 2011, she fell while boarding a flight leaving Yemen. 2012, she collapsed at home, striking her head, supposedly because she was dizzy and dehydrated from the flu. But she sustained a concussion, which means she was unconscious when she fell and couldn't block the fall. She was hospitalized for 3 nights. An MRI discovered a blood clot in a vein between the brain and the skull, on which she was put blood thinners, Coumadin, which is a very, very dangerous medication. Now, story coming out of Breitbart, Dr. Jane Orient, who's executive director of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, is calling out the corporate media for being obviously very silent about these questions of Hillary Clinton's health. And there are valid concerns that need to be dealt with. And the media's attitude is, no, it's just a conspiracy theory. Meanwhile, polls are showing 59% of Americans say we need to see Hillary Clinton's medical records. If there's nothing wrong, why will she not release them? There's an area of concern. Now, getting on to the other side of the campaign, Donald Trump is basically reiterating the position he took during the primaries. He wants to go back to peace through commerce. He's saying America is going to be open for business with the world under his presidency, wants to go back to being friends with Russia and China, wants to trade with them, wants to trade with everybody. And he's saying he's not an isolationist, which is a charge that's been leveled at him for not wanting to invade other countries. And he's not isolationist, he just wants to trade with all those other countries. And that's a big difference here. Now, there is word that former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers might be joining the Trump team. He was also the chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. So he sounds like somebody who would be a real asset to Trump's administration. Now, CNN yesterday put out this story about how the Secret Service talked to Donald Trump about his assassination comment, which Trump never actually used the word assassination. And as it turns out, the Secret Service didn't approach Donald Trump about his comment at all. CNN just made it up. And their ratings took another major hit because nobody likes a liar, especially from the Clinton News Network. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the serious news, I just had something posted by a member to WhatReallyHappened.com, and it just tells you that this whole political correctness nonsense has definitely jumped the shark. According to the Urban Institute, which is a Washington-based community engagement research organization, Pokemon Go is racist. It's a racist game. How dare you play that racist? I don't think you should play it anyway. It's causing a lot of problems. People are distracted while walking, while driving. They're being lured by the Pokemons into places they ought not to go. Already the retailers are starting to arrange for the Pokemon monsters to be inside their retail establishments to drag people in and everything. But to declare it racist, it's just cartoons. I mean, come on. Now, getting on back to this brouhaha over Trump's Second Amendment statement. Oh, it's a call for an assassination. And they're just trying to go absolutely wacko. But do you remember during the primary season there was all this casual talk about what a great thing assassinating Donald Trump would be? Nobody got their knickers in a twist over that, did they? It's only now, now it's a problem. Except, of course, Donald Trump didn't call for assassinating anybody. What he said was that if Hillary was president and picked the judges for the Supreme Court, we could probably lose the Second Amendment. And then he said maybe this Second Amendment people could do something about it. Now, if you really think objectively about it, when he's talking about the Second Amendment people, he's talking about the National Rifle Association, whose lobbying and political clout are legendary. So it's very easy to look at that and say Donald Trump was saying that, maybe the pro-gun people can peacefully fight back against loss of the Second Amendment. And there are grounds to do that because the Supreme Court can't throw an amendment out under the Constitution. It takes another amendment to remove an amendment. But they grabbed on it, the corporate media just grabs on anything that Trump says. He could sneeze and they'd turn it into something sinister and evil. And the reality is the gun issue is not about crime and terror because our government is the biggest criminal and terrorist on the planet. It's a choice between a police state and a free society, and I choose a free society. And so did our founding fathers. That's why they gave us that Second Amendment. And if you go back and you read some of their quotes, and we did post some of them to the front of What Really Happened, they understood that the only way for a free people to stay free is to be able to stand against tyrannical government. And that's why they gave us the Second Amendment, to keep the American people free from tyranny. They didn't give us that Second Amendment because the deer were coming. The Founding Fathers understood the curse of politics is that it attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have power. Hillary Clinton's a good example. And anybody who's willing to do anything to attain political power is usually equally ready to do anything with it once they have it. All governments over time tend toward oligarchy. The Founding Fathers, Thomas Jefferson in particular, attempted to craft a governmental system that reserved control of the nation to the people. And as the chicanery and politicking and election fraud during the primary season has shown us, we have all but lost that control that was the gift bequeathed to us by the Founding Fathers. And it's time for us to take it back. It's ours. Our freedom, our rights belong to us, and they are not subject to the whims of politicians who cannot go to sleep at night after all their crimes and corruptions unless Americans are totally helpless and disarmed. Now, in the latest attempt to try and bash Donald Trump, somebody started this Twitter rumor storm, probably Hillary's troll squad, the pack with $1 million, that Donald Trump is a financial supporter of NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. Now, there's absolutely nothing to support this, and even the normally pro-establishment Snopes is saying this is complete nonsense. Hillary's people are doing what's called the pasta approach on Donald Trump. They're just flinging up any accusation they can and hoping it'll stick. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And with regards to AROutfitting.com, it's worth a visit. There's a lot of cool stuff there. Even if you are not a gun enthusiast, They've got the best of the LED flashlights. And if you, like me, maintain an emergency kit, whether you call it a hurricane kit or an earthquake kit, there's a lot of good stuff in there that would be very useful for that kind of prepping, which you need to think of based on where you live. Now, before we went to the commercial break, we're talking about the latest completely bogus, made-up from thin air allegation against Donald Trump that he's a supporter of NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, the pedophile advocacy group. And I have to wonder if somewhere in the back rooms of Hillary's campaign headquarters, they're making this stuff up with a dartboard. Just saying, Donald Trump is donating money to NAMBLA. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's go with that.
Sales director here at Rolls-Royce.
And we had a... Oh, I love the modern technology. So Hillary's campaign is doing all this nonsense. And you kind of have to wonder, what are they going to think of next? Donald Trump shot down the Hindenburg. Donald Trump personally nailed Jesus to the cross. Donald Trump shot JFK. In fact, I actually saw that one out there, that he was somehow involved. Donald Trump built a Death Star and casino. Free lightsaber if you book your visit 2 parsecs in advance. All righty, on to more serious notes. What is really amazing, I think we're seeing this election. First of all, there's no question, this is the dirtiest, most fraudulent, most corrupt election in U.S. history. There's no question about that. And I think in the process, we're seeing the 2 traditional parties destroy themselves. Now, you need to keep in mind something that the traditional parties have been sort of keeping under wraps. More and more Americans do not identify with either of those parties. They see themselves as completely independent, not aligned with the party. And it's on the verge of being a majority of Americans, which is another reason these polls where they claim to be showing Hillary way ahead are bogus, because we know they're overpolling Democrats and underpolling Republicans, and they're not polling the independents at all, most of whom overwhelmingly are supporting Donald Trump. And it's getting even uglier. You've probably seen this parade of Republicans out there saying, well, I can't stand Donald Trump. I'm going to support Hillary Clinton. Basically underlining for the American people that there really isn't a difference between the 2 parties in terms of ideology. It's just where's the money? Where's the power? Where's the war? And they're moving on over there. And now it's getting really, really dirty, because Politico is reporting that more than 70 Republicans have signed an open letter to Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus, telling him to not give any more Republican Party money to Donald Trump, but just shift that money to Senate and House races. Just cut off the money. That's their latest tactic to derail Donald Trump. That's how afraid they are that this man is going to spoil their little insider party. These 70 so-called Republicans want to give the White House to Hillary Clinton. Now, setting aside the huge amount of scandals from the past and the Clintons, let's look at Hillary herself today, who by her own admission has brain short circuits that cause her to lose touch with reality, as was demonstrated when she insisted that FBI Director James Comey had confirmed she was truthful with the American people in Congress about her private email server. Comey, of course, said no such thing. What Comey did say is that Hillary is reckless and negligent. Then there's Huma Abedin in that official State Department email telling staffers they have to handhold Hillary when she talked to foreign leaders because, in Huma's own words, she gets confused. So, reckless, confused, negligent, poor connection to reality, these are all qualities we dare not allow in the White House. Hillary couldn't keep her own email server private. Why should she be trusted with the nuclear launch codes? And now we have 70 Republicans who are so afraid of Donald Trump that they want to give the White House to this person. That's how absurd this really has grown. All right, let's grab a phone call. Hugh in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike. Hey, I have a question for you. Maybe you covered this. I was out of the room. But what happens if Hillary does her health fails prior to the election? I mean, what rules do the Democrats follow, and you know, what's the plan B, actually, I guess?
Well, I think the most probable situation is that Kaine would move up to be the presidential nominee, and the DNC would get together to pick somebody to be the new vice president nominee. It's almost kind of moot, because if Hillary, for some reason, is unable to get to November because of her health, then Trump is going to be the next president. Period. End of discussion. Kaine cannot work against Donald Trump, and in fact, they don't really have anybody who could defeat Donald Trump. So if Hillary has a health crisis between now and November, then it's pretty much over but the shouting.
Okay. You don't think that Biden would step in for the party?
They might, but I don't think Biden could win against Donald Trump either, because he's got a lot of baggage.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. I love your show, and I try to listen to it every day. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, and we're going to let you go here. Now, over in Iowa, there was a Clinton rally. There's a video of it. And the story is that animal rights activists attempted to rush Hillary on the stage. They were stopped by the Secret Service and the police. And the only reason I mention that is, looking in this video, you can see just how small that crowd really is at this Hillary event. And as we reported earlier in the week, the media, or Hillary's campaign, has been caught photoshopping huge crowds for Hillary's rallies to counter Twitter pictures showing these huge stadium sellout crowds for Trump and hardly anybody showing up for Hillary Clinton. All righty, now, Hillary supporters are continuing to demonstrate to the world that they are, in fact, the modern incarnation of the brown shirts. Apparently, Hillary supporters burned down a Trump sign on private property, which is a criminal action. They could have set fire to the whole neighborhood, but hey, who cares? We've got to get Hillary in the White House. I'll burn down the entire town if I have to. And Donald Trump personally called the owner of the sign to, express his sympathy and hope the damages what weren't too great. So let's turn over here to John McCain, who's facing an uphill battle in Arizona. And there is a huge scandal erupting there because a recording has surfaced. And the claim here is that the CIA had misfiled this recording for all these years since Vietnam. And this recording is very clearly John McCain making a Tokyo Rose-like statement about, yes, I came here as an invading power, I'm guilty of war crimes, my government is guilty of war crimes, blah, 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 blah. Now, the problem here is not that McCain made the recording. Under torture, a lot of POWs made similar recordings. Under U.S. torture, a lot of Iraqis claimed to know where Saddam's nuclear weapons were hidden, which turned out not to exist. The problem here is that McCain claimed that he'd refused to make any recordings despite being tortured. That was his story. And he was awarded the Silver Star for his heroism and built his entire political career on this lie of being a war hero from Vietnam. Of course, those who knew him in Vietnam knew he had made these recordings. They nicknamed him Songbird McCain. So why did McCain get all this special treatment despite his treason? Well, it's worth remembering that John McCain's father, Admiral McCain, was in charge of the U.S. cover-up of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. The McCains are hereditary servants of Israel. And that's why John McCain today is one of the worst of the Israel firsters. Loot the American people, send the money to Israel. Israel's great. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. We've got to, so forth and so on. Now, Vladimir Putin has come on out and once again stated the truth. He says the U.S. elections are rigged. The United States is not a democracy. And this is probably the crookedest election in U.S. history. This election is so crooked they're having to screw those ballots into the ballot boxes. And more people are starting to conduct their own investigation and discover just how easy it is to rig these machines. And there's this article that came out of thenextweb.com where you can buy this little card for just $15. that will allow you to go into a voting booth with one of these electronic voting machines and vote as many times as you want. You don't need to leave the booth. You can just sit there and pretend to be 10 people. And Semantic Security Response Director Kevin Haley said that each of these machines are also vulnerable to other hacks, including those that take place after the votes have been cast, which is what Bev Harris focused on in that HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy. Well, as you know, when Donald Trump first came on out and made the subject of election rigging polite conversation, Obama, first of all, came out and said, it's ridiculous to think that our elections are rigged. What kind of a silly thing? And, of course, he drew a huge amount of flack from people who pointed out election rigging is part of U.S. history. Huey P. Long, the Battle of Athens, Tennessee. That's just the reality. And all of the documented fraud taking place during this year's primary season. Down in San Diego, the federal judge said, yeah, there's a problem with the way the election was being run, but since California's already certified, we can't really do anything about it. Too bad. They stole it fair and square. So now Obama has changed tacks because his goal now is to somehow convince all the American people that despite a long history of crooked elections in this country, despite all the fraud that took place during the primaries, that November's election is going to be absolutely 100% honest, and he's doing that by placing control of the election under the Department of Homeland Security, which is not going to reassure anybody. And he's trying to sell this idea by claiming Russia is going to hack the U.S. election to put Donald Trump into the White House. Now, that's nonsense for a bunch of reasons. First of all, Donald Trump doesn't need any vote rigging. He's doing wonderful in every single poll not associated with the corporate media outlet. Second, the voting machines do not work on the Internet, which means they're unreachable from Russia. Those electronic voting machines work on these memory cards. And as Bev Harris showed, that's one of the places where the fraud actually takes place. The people in the voting locations are the ones in a position to do the fraud. So Obama is now going to have the electronic voting machines placed under Department of Homeland Security control. And it's not being done to keep Russia out. It's being done to prevent anybody from looking closely at the fraud that is going to be taking place in November. That's what's going on. So let's turn to the war zones. The Syrian army forces have recaptured several areas in southern Aleppo. And they're fighting back and forth. They had a siege. The siege was broken. The siege has been reimposed. Russia's in there just bombing all of these supply centers. And there was a story that came out earlier today that was being presented as this scandalous situation where the House of Representatives did a study and came on out and said Central Command reports were painting a very rosy picture on the fight against ISIS, that they were over-reporting successes. And how could you do that? And I know that part of the agenda is to sort of rebrand ISIS as a bigger threat, despite all the rosy reports about ISIS is on the run. Remember when Kerry said the increase in terror attacks proved that ISIS was losing the war? Well, they need to revive ISIS as a boogeyman. So now they're going to say, oh, Central Command was lying about this. But there's something else to keep in mind. Central Command had to lie about the success against ISIS because there never really was a war against ISIS. The U.S. was arming, supplying ISIS, certainly in Syria. That's been documented. And every time the U.S. went into Syria on the excuse that they were fighting ISIS, they would miss ISIS and they'd blow up critical Syrian economic infrastructure. And we'd get this lame story from the U.S. government. Oh, our pilots need glasses. I'm sorry. It's just, maybe we ought to give the pilots some of those Fresnel prisms that help Hillary see what she's aiming at. So there never really was a war against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They had to manufacture the illusion of one and then claim to be winning. And that's why the intel reports were being cooked. Turkey has signaled that they are going to go along with this joint defense plan with Russia. And that's a smart thing for Erdogan to do because in the wake of the failed coup and his turning away from the U.S., he knows that, based on past history, the U.S. will follow up with some kind of an excuse to invade. Oh, ISIS is now in Turkey. We're going to go and bomb the power stations there, because ISIS uses electric lights, and therefore we're justified. So now he's forming a joint defense plan with Russia, which means an attack on Turkey is an attack on Russia, which unfortunately for Mr. Erdogan will not discourage the U.S. because war with Russia is that ultimate goal. But more and more people are getting off this war wagon that the U.S. is trying to roll down the hill into Putin's living room. Boris Johnson is out there now openly saying it's time for Britain and Russia to normalize their relations. Italy's signaling that they want to do business with Russia. France's parliament, back in June, voted to ignore the anti-Russian sanctions because it had cost their agriculture sector so much. What is the United States to do? Well, what they tried to do was kick off some kind of a conflict inside Ukraine itself. And apparently there were 3 sabotage teams discovered by the FSB coming in from Ukraine with Ukrainian equipment, which means they're working for Poroshenko, who works for the United States government. And they went on in and they were going to blow a bunch of stuff up, and the FSB knew about it somehow. And there were firefights and people on both sides got killed. Well, this is not something that you want to do with somebody that you're trying to make a peaceful agreement with. And Putin is basically out there saying Kiev has turned to terrorism as a tool of their foreign policy. And Moscow cannot turn a blind eye to the deaths and harm that were caused by all of this. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the situation in Crimea, where teams of saboteurs crossed into Crimea from Ukraine with Ukrainian equipment and were caught by the FSB. And it resulted in firefights and deaths on both sides. Moscow is obviously very angry about this, and they should be. And basically Putin has come on out and said that the Minsk negotiations are now completely pointless because of this provocation by Kiev. Because what's the point of going to a negotiating table to talk about peace when Ukraine is sending in clandestine saboteur teams to try and blow up important things in Crimea? Now, the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, has ordered all of his forces on the border with Crimea and eastern Ukraine on the highest possible alert. They're ready. They're ready for the counterattack. Yes, we poked Putin really good. He's going to attack now and the war will be going on. That may be what Poroshenko in Washington, D.C. is thinking. I seriously doubt Putin will fall for it, because Putin understands the real goal here is to get into a war with Russia. And I think they're starting to rush it from this side, from the U.S., with the growing realization that all the vote fraud and corporate propaganda in the world is not going to get Hillary into that White House. Remember what I said this morning, looking at her face with the sound turned off? That smug sense of entitlement and self-assurance is gone. And so for the war hawks to get the war they want, they're going to have to start it and really get into it before Donald Trump has a chance to get into the White House and say, let's talk peace. They're going to create a war and hand it to him and say, we dare you to get, even though the war be wrong, we are in it. We must fight it out. We cannot retire without dishonor, or there's some such nonsense here. Now, unfortunately, this sabotage attempt in Crimea has fanned up tensions a little bit. And Russian military expert Viktor Morakovsky, in an interview with Komsomolets, was saying that right now, following the precedent set by the United States itself, Moscow has a legal right to bomb terrorist targets in Ukraine. Now, that, of course, is exactly what the U.S. wants to happen, to open that door to war with Russia. And I don't think Putin is going to fall into that trap. Okay, now then, recently over in the Black Sea, NATO held this huge exercise called Sea Breeze, basically showing that we can go into the Black Sea despite the Montreux Convention. The rules don't apply to us. We're the United States of America. And according to Alexei Zuravko, apparently Sea Breeze delivered mercenaries to the Crimean borders. So they're going to start the war in Crimea. We'll be right back after station identification. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And yes, World War III is a really bad idea. And the problem is that all the people who want that war and think they're going to profit from it, they've already got their underground bunkers. You paid for them. You will not be allowed in them. Now, before we take this next phone call and get back to the war news, I just got an email from somebody who got hit with this scam that's going around. We talked about it earlier in the week, and I'm going to repeat it again. You're working on your computer, and all of a sudden there's this pop-up that says, you may have a Trojan. Call this phone number, and we will help you clean your machine. And you call the number, and they get your credit card information or your bank information for the payment, and then they empty your account, and you will never hear from them again. As a general rule of thumb, do not allow anybody to come on into your computer remotely to remove anything. 99% of the time, it's going to be malware. Get your own internal security software. You've got Malwarebytes. It's free. It's a good one. Spybot Search and Destroy. Also free. A very good one. And if you're going to be willing to spend the money for a good antivirus system, I would go with Kaspersky, because they're in Russia and not tangled up with the NSA and Mossad and CIA. All right, let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. And don't send no money to anybody in Africa for an inheritance. People getting those emails. I remember I got one a long time ago. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, 5 hours. That's how long it would take for the Russian armor to be in Kiev. So, Putin's not going to do anything. If there was an actual attack, then you'd have no choice. But there wasn't. So he's just going to sit back and let this ride out. Moving troops and transport equipment around is one thing. He's just, beefing up the security. There's another when you got tanks rolling over the border, and that ain't happening. So.
Yeah, but have you seen how many times they've tried to claim that Russian tanks had gone over the border when the U.S. staged the coup d'etat in Kiev, and those eastern Ukrainian republics started to break away, and there were all these phony satellite pictures and media pictures about Russian tanks are inside Ukraine, they're coming to attack, and they all turned out to be complete nonsense. People were taking these photos of the supposed Russian tanks in Ukraine and using Google's image search function to discover that, yes, it was a Russian tank, but the photo was taken 3 years ago in some other completely different part of the world. And I have absolutely no doubt that when they really start to crank up this war, that we are going to be just flooded with propaganda to assure us this is all somehow Russia's fault. The Russians are evil, we are good, and anybody who doesn't agree is a traitor.
Well, people don't realize, even if the fall of the Soviet Union really didn't, it slowed down Russian development slightly, but the military didn't go anywhere. That's what people don't realize. That was a civilian problem. The military didn't go anywhere on the collapse of the Soviet Union. Sure, they had to re-judder stuff around, but they're still, it's got the largest land army in the world. To mess with them is, Napoleon and Hitler learned their lesson.
The hard way. And it had nothing to do with the weapons. The Russians are just tough people. Look what happened at the Rio Olympics, where this Russian diplomat was riding around in his car, and a robber on a motorcycle pulled up alongside, said, "Give me your money," and the diplomat drags him off the motorcycle through the window into the car and kills him. That's how tough the Russians are.
He should get another gold medal for Russia for doing that.
Yeah, and then the IRS will just tax him for it.
Won the judo gold, Hey, Mike, people don't realize China and Russia, they got the largest missile arsenal in the world.
Yes.
Including anti-ship, the super cavitating torpedo. to start a war with Russia is just insanity. And,
yeah, but the U.S. government doesn't have any of their ideas here. And going on back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, what it did when the budget for the military began to shrink is they used it as an opportunity to decommission and take out of service a lot of the older hardware that they really was kind of borderline. And then as the Russian economy began to build back up again, they started building newer generation weapons. It's all new equipment. Meanwhile, here in the United States of America, our military is exhausted by all these wars and interventions around the globe going on back to 2003. Our stockpiles are drawn down. The vehicles and ships and aircraft are worn out. They're not designed for long life expectancies because in the event of an actual war, you measure the lifespan of a military platform usually in terms of months rather than years. America's newest generation of weapons is overpriced junk. The usual product from the military-industrial complex. Here in the United States, building weapons is all about the money. In Russia and China, they're building weapons to build weapons. And they're effective. They're much cheaper than American weapons. The world has seen them on display over Syria, and a lot of countries that used to buy weapons from here in the United States, they're changing over. They want the Russian ones now because they're better. They're more reliable.
But you also need 3 times the manpower. You're going over there, don't forget. They're not coming here. You're going there to their area. So you need a lot more troops, and we ain't got it. So unless you people want to get drafted when you're going into Walmart, we don't have the manpower.
The U.S. may be counting on building up troop forces from the illegal immigrants and the refugees and put them in a uniform and say, we'll give you a green card if you're still alive at the end of the war. But these are people who are not emotionally connected to the United States of America. They're not going to be motivated fighters. The first time there's actually an attack at them, they're going to put their heads down. And it's a failed concept right from the start. And again, getting on back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War. In the very first chapter, he lays out all the conditions that must be met in order to win victory in a war. One of them is an army that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight as hard as they can and, if necessary, die in that war. And the second thing you have to have is a civilian population who also believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the hardships and burden war brings even to the winning side. And the United States has neither of those right now. And my concern is if they get this war going, there will be a day when all of a sudden they'll realize they can't win a conventional war against Russia and China, and that's when they're going to start turning those little brass keys in the silos, and it's going to be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. And we need to do a quick shout-out. Hang on a second, Destin, before we get back to you, I need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're talking about the war zones around the world and this very obvious, to me, push to try and get a major war going before Donald Trump can even get into the White House and spoil their plans. Okay, Destin?
Mike, remember in Donbass?
Yes.
And those breakaway provinces when NATO moved some advisors in there with the equipment, and when the breakaway province people pushed in, they found all that NATO equipment still sealed up that they just left behind.
Yes. Well, it's not their money, it's only the taxpayers' money. We don't care about saving any bucks for them. I mean, it was amazing how much, at the end of World War II, how much stuff was just dumped, scuttled, and thrown away because it was less expensive than trying to bring it back and store it. It really is an obscene waste of money. But then wars always are. I mean, wars are just fantastically expensive. The money just flows out like pouring water and disappears into the ground. But the first nation that runs out of money is the one who loses.
That's why we're on a decline, Mike. We're a welfare and a warfare state now, and that's nothing you can do to change that now.
We're a failed nation. We're a failed nation. We're failing for many of the same reasons as the Roman Empire failed.
Yep. All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Todd in Nebraska. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Todd.
Michael.
Hello.
We are taking a very large stick and poking a sleeping bear.
Yes.
And that bear is Russia.
Yes.
And my fear is they will wake up and not take it any longer. We've done many, many things to them that should piss them off. Excuse my language.
Well, that was the whole reason for doing it, trying to provoke Putin into doing something overt that could be seized on as saying, oh, see, Russia is starting this war. Because world opinion is going to side with whoever's perceived to be the victim. And that's what happened with Roosevelt and Pearl Harbor. Now, we have the actual memo from ONI Lieutenant Commander Arthur H. McCollum laying out the plan to provoke Japan into the attack on Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt followed that plan from all of 1941, and then when Japan finally did respond to the provocations and attack, it was declared a surprise attack by the Empire of Japan, the dastardly Empire of Japan. It was all their fault. And that's how these wars get started. They sent the Lusitania loaded with weapons, without military escorts, into an area of the North Atlantic where they knew the German U-boats were prowling, to let it be sunk so that they could say, oh, innocent passenger ship, Germany struck first. That's how these wars are always started. Every government that wants to get into a war for profit or conquest has to lie and trick their people into it. Whether it's the Lusitania, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Gleiwitz, the Reichstag fire, every single war is started with a lie and a fraud. And by the way, Sun Tzu even wrote about that in Art of War. All war is based on deception.
Or Twin Towers.
Yeah, the Twin Towers, exactly.
Thank you, Michael. I'll let you go.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All righty. Now, in response to this failed attempt at sabotage, Russia is obviously taking steps. Their Black Sea fleet is now holding drills, specifically to counter underwater sabotage. Because obviously, if Poroshenko is going to try and kick off the war, he's already indicated his first tactic will be to send in saboteur squads to blow up critical infrastructure, critical military infrastructure, in order to open a way for the attack. And that is a very common military tactic. And now Russia knows that Poroshenko is at that step on the track to war. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this recent deal in which the U.S. State Department and the Pentagon okayed a $1.2 billion sale of 153 Abrams tanks to Saudi Arabia. Okay? It turns out some of those are scheduled for what is called battle damage replacement for Saudi tanks lost in Yemen. Apparently, Saudi Arabia has not been doing all that well down there, and they're starting to run out of tanks. Now, we reported yesterday on how China is upgrading their aircraft carriers to carry more planes, more surveillance, and so forth. Now we're finding out that Beijing is installing these supersonic missiles on their most lethal destroyer, the Shenzhen destroyer. And these supersonic missiles that they're talking about are sea skimmer anti-ship missiles, which the U.S. phalanx system cannot intercept. Now, the U.S. has been developing a new generation of laser weapons, zero time-of-flight weaponry that will zap those sea skimmers coming in, before they can reach us. There's only one small problem. They really have not been able to get the lasers to work. They can't get enough energy to the target quickly enough to actually have an impact kill. Every test of a laser weapon that was done during the development of the Strategic Defense Initiative involved targets that were rigged with explosives that simply detonated when they detected the light beam. And the reality is that, first of all China and Russia have to do is start chrome plating their missiles, and that's the end of the laser defense right there. The problem is the United States has really been following the paradigm of World War II. They're rebuilding and rearming to refight World War II. And they haven't really been thinking about how different World War III is going to be. Now, over in Israel, as you know, Obama is offering Israel the largest military aid package ever, and it's still not enough. Israel is demanding the Obama administration give them more. It's already a $40 billion 10-year deal. Israel is saying, give us another $10 billion. And I'm sure there's been a phone call from Netanyahu to Obama saying, you give us that additional $10 billion, or we'll tell the world who really did 9/11, and it'll be worse for you than it is for us. So $50 billion. I wonder what could be done in this country for $50 billion in terms of repairing the roads, the bridges, making electricity reliable, making the tap water safe to drink. Isn't the U.S. government's first responsibility to the U.S.? I mean, that's what I always thought growing up. Certainly reading the Constitution, that seems to be the intention, that the U.S. government work for the American people and the United States of America, rather than simply plundering and looting us to give the money to foreign governments and Wall Street and bankers and all the rest of it. Government is the most expensive thing you will ever be forced to buy in your life. It's more expensive than your home, more expensive than your children's education. Are you getting value for your money? You need to answer that question. And if the answer is no, that's another reason to vote against Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton represents a continuation of the status quo in which you are not getting value for the money that you are forced to give to the government. Now, the good news is, over at the Institute for Research Middle Eastern Policy, they have filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government over all this money being taken from you and given to Israel. And the basis of the lawsuit is something I have told you many, many times before. It is illegal under U.S. law for the government to take your money and give it to Israel, or indeed any nation that is in possession of nuclear weapons technology, that refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, that refuses to allow IAEA inspections, and that, of course, is Israel. Remember Obama's first speech as president? And he was up there, and Helen Thomas asked him, what nations have nuclear weapons in the Middle East right now today? And Obama put on his tap shoes, and he danced away and said, well, we view nuclear proliferation as a serious issue, and we're keeping an eye on it, blah, blah, blah. 24 hours later, Helen Thomas was out of the White House press corps. Obama knows Israel has nuclear weapons. They've had them going all the way back to Johnson's administration. Obama knows that every penny of your money he sends to Israel is a crime against the American people under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and under the Glenn Act. And this lawsuit is going to force the issue into the court system, because there's no gray area in these laws. It is a crime. And our money has been taken from us wrongfully and given to Israel, and they do terrible things with it, and we are owed a refund. Now, getting into the economic news, even Reuters, which is about as pro-government as you can get in the corporate media, is starting to finally acknowledge the flaws in our current economic policy. They ran a story where money printing has pushed stocks out of kilter with economic reality. And that's absolutely true. The Federal Reserve creates new money. They dump it all over Wall Street. Wall Street buys up the stocks. The stock market indicators are looking really high. But it doesn't reflect the real state of the economy. It doesn't even reflect the underlying worth of the involved stocks. It's all manipulation. And even Reuters is now admitting there's a bit of a problem. Another article is saying, is the government getting ready to confiscate gold again? Talking about how Roosevelt did it in 1933. Yeah, as soon as they get your guns, they're coming for the gold. We're about to take a break for commercials. We got 2 callers waiting on the line, and we'll take those calls just as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. So stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go to the phones here. Keith in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hello there, Michael. I'm ashamed that you didn't have a hold of a picture of Milo. Anyway.
My bad.
Yeah. I have to tell you two things. I had a really good day up at the repeater site the other day with the Forest Service and all the users up there. It was sure nice to see the government working with the users at the electronics site. Anyway, I called about another thing. You jumped topics on me really fast. You know, most people don't realize this, but if you look at the GDP of Israel and its, what do you call that, the...
standard of living.
Yeah. It lists about 8 million. That doesn't mean that all 8 million live there. But anyway, demographically, it shows 8 million people live there. And then also, if you look, you'll see that that Israel is reselling the Iron Dome system to South Korea. So if you look at all the billions that go to that small little entity of 8 million people like that, compared to our 300,000 veterans that have died, the 274 Marines that were dumped in a Virginia landfill, the remains, make sure I say remains. But it just goes to show you that our country is being sold out.
It really is, and it's a very ugly situation. And it's not just Iron Dome, because the U.S. government will transfer military technology to Israel. Israel will then reverse engineer it, turn around, and sell it to other countries. And they're not paying any research and development costs. They're just, taking and copying our product and selling it. One of the other ways the Congress will give money to Israel under the table is over and above the actual foreign aid, which is illegal. They will loan Israel more money, and then down the road, quietly in the middle of the night when nobody's paying attention, they'll forgive the loan and write it off, so that Israel can honestly and truthfully say, we've never failed to repay a loan. Well, yeah, but the person loaning the money basically said, forget about it, we're tearing up the IOU. And it really is underhanded. Another thing that has really been a problem over the years is the U.S. government will take brand new U.S. military equipment, which the taxpayer paid full price for, and they'll just arbitrarily declare it to be surplus, at which point it can be sold to Israel for just a few pennies on the dollar. So they're getting this stuff at bargain basement prices. The corruption is just endless.
Yeah, I get a lot of Jewish friends, too, especially in the radio field here. Mm-hmm. But even they're kind of alert about what's going on there, and especially since a lot of them are veterans here, and they can't get health services.
Yeah, and again, how our veterans are being treated, it's a scandal. It's really ugly. Anything else, Keith?
Yeah, I want you and Sarah to have a nice day.
We certainly will. We actually have got good weather for a change out here. All those hurricanes that were threatening us kind of spun out. So, things are kind of, it's a little muggy, but other than that, it's a good day.
Well, it's 44 degrees on top of the mountain, so winter's coming.
Yeah, it is. And apparently snow has come early to Sweden. They're opening up the winter sports venues early and rubbing their hands together. Ski season is already underway there. It is about 89 degrees here right now. Actually, it's 85 degrees outside, 53% humidity.
Sounds good. You have a good one, Mike. Okay?
Same to you. And we're going to switch over to Steve in California. But, Steve, I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break, okay?
Sure.
So what's on your mind?
You haven't mentioned it in a while, and I haven't found any in the news, but what's going on with the Benjamin Netanyahu son investigation for money laundering?
Well, he's under investigation. We don't know if anything is going to be done about it, but we do know that a member of the Knesset earlier this week literally proposed a new law for Israel saying that the prime minister is immune from criminal prosecution. So I think that's telegraphing the fact that Netanyahu was probably involved in what's going on. And again, this is the normal model. Erdogan was making tons of money off of stolen Syrian oil that was being trucked into Turkey and resold by his son. We certainly know how our politicians are corrupt and up to their necks in all of these nefarious business deals and everything, insider trading, which is illegal for you and I, but apparently it's okay for members of Congress to do that. All right, listen, we got to take a break. Steve, stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you.
I got it.
As soon as we finish these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Steve in California. And, Steve, what was your next question?
Well, I'm wondering if there's something kind of internal thing going on in his administration, Netanyahu's, that somebody from inside is trying to oust him, and of course they look for any way they can do that, but oust him to find somebody else who would take the reins and basically be more aggressive on their goals of acquiring more land in Palestine. And then if you connect the dots with all the money we're giving them, I just kind of wonder if there's something inside maybe that's going on.
I'm sure there probably is, and we've got a bad phone connection here, so I'm going to have to let you go soon. But before I do that, it could be as simple as somebody who wants to be prime minister and understands that Netanyahu is going to stay prime minister as long as he possibly can, and they need to pull him down to create a vacancy that they can move into. It's hard to imagine anybody who's going to be more aggressive than Netanyahu in trying to grab what's left of Palestine. They even got Google to erase West Bank and Gaza off their maps the other day. Google is claiming it's an accident, but I checked this out this morning. It's still there. If you go to Google Earth and you put Palestine in the search engine, it takes you to a spot in the Atlantic off the southwest coast of Africa. And the map indicates there's an undersea mount there. So maybe Google thinks Palestine is actually the lost city of Atlantis, but that doesn't look like an accident to me. That looks like somebody went in and changed the data for political purposes.
I agree. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Mike in South Carolina. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is something's not being talked about what Israel's involved with, and that is a link at the hip with Anna Merkel of Germany.
Yes.
Where she has made 5 nuclear cruise-tipped submarines available to Israel. I want to know where they are. Nobody's talking about those submarines. They're as deadly and dangerous as they can be, and I'll tell you something. If Israel pops out just one cruise missile with a nuke on it, like they did once before, there's going to be hell to pay for that. And it'll come right here in the United States first, too. I've had enough of nonsense of Israel and being hooked to hit with the U.S. government, too. They're all in together. You know who's doing this stuff.
Okay.
Where are those submarines?
Let me back you up just a little tiny bit. Germany providing these Dolphin-class submarines to Israel goes back to before Angela Merkel came into power. The first, I think it was 3, were provided free of charge as reparations to Israel for what the Nazis supposedly did. Now, Germany did not provide nuclear weapons with these submarines, but they can be fitted with nuclear weapons by Israel. And they are not nuclear boats. They are diesel electric, so they do require surface tenders and they have a limited range. They have been caught going down the Suez Canal and through the Bosphorus into the Black Sea. And you're absolutely correct. Israel could sneak one of these submarines in someplace, and being diesel electric, they're a lot quieter and harder to hear than a nuclear-powered boat. And they wouldn't even need a nuclear weapon. They could fire a torpedo at a NATO ship, claim that the attack came from, whoever they wanted to demonize, and scurry on out from there. But you are correct in the fact that Israel is the master of the false flag attack. And Israel survives by tricking other countries into fighting its wars for them.
Are you aware that about a year and a half ago that Russia, with one of their attack helicopters, took one of those submarines out? It sank at 480 feet of water with 80 people aboard. When that submarine, that diesel submarine with a nuclear tipped cruise missile, that cruise missile was launched against one of the cities. I think it was in Syria, and Putin said, "No, you're not going to get away with this one." He went over there and sunk the thing real quick.
I heard
it's not been talked about either.
I heard the story. I've never been able to find confirmation on it.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be in the process of being salvaged right now because there's some more nuke stuff on there right now. So we've just got issues with Israel. Period. I think you just give it back, give Israel back to Palestine. Get Palestine back in there and just pull the plug on Israel and let it go right into history as far as I'm concerned.
Well, all governments are corrupt. Israel's government is just the Olympic gold medal winner when it comes to corruption and underhandedness.
When you have people like Obama and Netanyahu these people are hooked to the hip because they have one thing in common, because they're Jewish.
Well, I think it's more a network of corruption. Israel has managed to infiltrate a lot of the American media, a lot of the American economy. They're disproportionately represented within our government. Everyone talks about the dual nationals, which should not be allowed. I think we should have only Americans in the American government. But they're masters at this game of corruption and subversion. And I remember when I was growing up in school and we were seeing all these videos about Russia's coming to subvert our government, and we were all, oh, we've got to fight Russian subversion. Our government was being subverted. We were just being told to look in the wrong direction. Anyway, Mike, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to the news, this story just kind of came across my desk, and you are not going to hear this on the corporate media. Now, let me give you a little background and history as to how we got to this situation. Not too long ago, I'm forgetting exactly when it was, Larry Klayman, who was the founder of Judicial Watch, he's got another outfit down in Florida, filed an absolutely ironclad lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation for this pay-to-play activity, which the recent emails have confirmed was going on. Klayman had the misfortune of having this case assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who threw the case out of court without reviewing the material, at which point the FBI came on in and took over the case. Now, as you know, the FBI had a separate investigation into the email server that was initiated as a possible espionage case. Now, as it turns out, and this just came up on townhall.com, the FBI apparently found enough problems with that Clinton Foundation to refer the case to the Department of Justice. Comey may have given Hillary a get-out-of-jail-free card on her email server, but whatever the FBI found about the Clinton Foundation, it was enough for them to refer the matter to the Department of Justice for investigation and prosecution. The Department of Justice, Loretta Lynch, turned it down, saying that they had looked at the Clinton Foundation a while back and didn't see anything unusual, therefore they weren't interested in what the FBI had found now. So, what's going on here? If I am correct, and Hillary was selling U.S. secrets to foreign governments and using her foundation to collect and launder the money, and remember, 40% of the money that went into the Clinton Foundation came from foreign sources. It's espionage, it's treason. If it comes out, if somebody blows the whistle, it is a scandal that will not only evaporate Hillary Clinton's candidacy for the White House, it could bring down the entire government as well, because of all these cases of government agencies which should be looking into this stuff being told to look the other way. A serving Secretary of State committing espionage within the State Department is a scandal capable of delegitimizing the entire government in the eyes of the American people. And I think that's the most protected spot. That's where everybody is working together to say, we're not going to look. We don't want to investigate. Don't want to ask any questions that we don't want the answers to. Nobody in the corporate media or the government is even raising this possibility. Not even to ridicule it. Try and dismiss it. Make it go to, oh, it's more tinfoil hat conspiracy wacko. The silence, as they say, is deafening. And yet, there is a precedent for the Clintons doing this back in 1996, that Chinagate scandal. And during that Chinagate scandal, Bill Clinton was authorizing the sale of sensitive U.S. technology to China. Chinese money was flowing into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign. It was funneled through American citizens of Chinese ancestry to make it legal. One of the people who was funneling that money was Charlie Tree. And when questioned about it, he said, yes, the money's coming from China. It was coming from this Chinese billionaire, Lap Seng, who refused to cooperate with the investigation. Then he got arrested on an unrelated bribery case. He's in court now on that bribery case. And one of the other people caught in that bribery scandal was this former UN official, John Ash, who just before he was about to testify about the Clintons' links to Lap Seng, died. Initially, they said of a heart attack. Then they had to revise it and say he accidentally dropped a barbell on his own throat. When you look at all these connections, that most protected point is that server and the Clinton Foundation. And it's the heart of what is probably the worst internal scandal for espionage and treason in our nation's history. And everybody's working to protect it. Even Hillary's worst enemies are working to protect this scandal. Because they want to go on with their fat government paychecks and their positions and offices and so forth. And now we have the FBI found enough about the Clinton Foundation to refer to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice said, we don't have anything to do with this. We don't want to wind up dead in Fort Marcy Park. What's wrong with you people? All right, let's talk about the economic news now. And the news is not good. Macy's, Thanksgiving Day Parade, people, is closing yet another 100 stores. 15% of its workforce, of its retail space. 15%. All those jobs are gone. And it's strange to see retailers closing their stores at this time of year, because this is the time of year when they're getting ready to ramp up for the holiday shopping season. And probably as a sign of just how desperate the retailers are, I am not kidding you, at our local shopping mall, they're already starting to put up the Christmas stuff. This is August we're talking about. Christmas time is here, by golly, disapproval would be folly, and so forth and so on. I'm not kidding. Christmas trees, ornaments are out there. We were at the craft store looking for something the other day, and they've got all the yarn snowmen and the Santa Clauses are all on display. Yes, it's going to be a big push. Now, I remember when I was a kid, Christmas in the home was basically a 2-week affair, and it lined up with the school holiday. Because back then, most people had live Christmas trees, and you don't want to keep those in your house too long because they become a real fire hazard. And yes, I'm old enough to have seen Christmas trees with actual candles on them instead of the electric lights. And that was it. It was a 2-week thing. You put up the decorations, 2 weeks later you take them down. That's it. Macy's convinced us that the holiday shopping season began as soon as Thanksgiving was over. And that was maybe kind of acceptable, especially in an age where you're buying gifts that have to be sent through the post office and UPS to other parts of the nation. But to see them setting up the Christmas stuff in August betrays a deep sense of desperation and a reminder that the American Christmas is just another marketing scam. It's completely lost all connection with the spirit of Christmas or what it's supposed to be. The last really honest Christmas, if you will, that I experienced was not in the United States. It was in Munich, Germany. And it was such a shock to see what real Christmas spirit and Christmas cheer was like. And the American version of Christmas, it's just a sales gimmick. And it pales in comparison. It really is. Now then, getting on to some other news here. Obamacare is in serious trouble. The entire system is on the verge of collapse. The premiums are going to soar next year, in some cases by 80%. Some of the insurance companies who got on board this, they were actually the authors of the Affordable Care Act, and they thought they were going to make billions of dollars, have had to pull out. Many of the exchanges have shut down. They've collapsed. A big part of the problem has to do with younger people who are being disproportionately charged on their health insurance to cover the elderly and the ultra-poor. And from their point of view, they're being asked to spend huge amounts of money on a health insurance policy in all probability they're not going to need because they're young and healthy. And so they're choosing to simply live without health insurance, pay their medical costs in cash, and accept the IRS penalty on their taxes. And it's a disaster. Obamacare is an epic fail. It has failed in its overt purpose of making health care affordable to the American people, and it failed in its covert real purpose of generating billions of dollars in new profits for the health insurance and medical industries, and the U.S. government would get their mafia-like piece of the action in the taxes. And it's a complete failure, which is why I can guarantee you that Obama is going to hit you with that carbon tax. Global warming, it's all your fault. You must give us money. We will save the world from you icky-poo human beings. Trust us, we're the government. Would we lie to you? Apparently over at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, they're in trouble. New housing bubble, new mortgage failures. They're looking at needing yet another taxpayer bailout, this time of $126 billion with a B, to prop up Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They're trying to basically keep this economy alive. It's on life support. Because what really drives an economy is the working and middle class who are able to translate their labor into decent wages and salaries to generate that wealth and pump it into the system. Now, when you want to move a house, you grab it by the foundation and you move it. You put it on the trailer and you drag it off. If you try and move a house by grabbing the roof, it'll shatter. The same thing applies to the economy. If you want to move this economy, you have to apply whatever measures you're doing to the middle class and working class American people. You have to improve their wealth and income so that it can then be fed into the economy as a whole. All this quantitative easing and everything, they're basically trying to pick the economy up by the tip, and it's shattering. We got to take a break. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones. Sean in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Mike. I'm having a kind of a iffy connection, so I'm going to go ahead and make my statement and listen to your comment off there about it.
Okay.
I just wanted to spread the word. The other day on the Lisa Haven show, she had Larry Nichols on, and they were talking about the election. And he wanted everybody to spread the word that one really good way that you can combat the fraud and try to stop her from stealing it is to vote an absentee ballot. He said that is the one way that they cannot jostle the numbers. And I'll go ahead and hang up because I don't understand it. I know the guy's pretty credible as far as everything he's said up to this point. So I thought that was interesting and wanted to get your take on it, and I'll hang up and listen to your comment. Thank you.
Well, yeah, what Larry Nichols is thinking about is not having to use those electronic machines, which we know are fraudulent. But absentee ballots are not fraud-proof either. In fact, absentee ballots is where a large amount of fraud takes place when there are no electronic machines, where they will harvest identities and do bogus voter registrations and send in absentee ballots under those names. The other problem with the absentee ballots is they're treated like provisional ballots. They're not even counted unless there are enough of them to change the outcome of the regular election process. But as we've already seen out in California, they'll count the electronic vote, declare a victor, and then just destroy those provisional or absentee ballots. That's what all this big stink out in California was about, because there were enough of those provisional ballots to have reversed the outcome of the California Democratic primary, but they were simply discarded. In fact, they were shredded, which is illegal. I still think, and I'm going to be pushing this idea as we get into October, that everyone who's going to vote for Donald Trump, after you have voted, don't do this at the polling place, because that'll be considered electioneering in the polling place, and that is illegal, even though the Clintons got caught doing it during the primaries. After you have voted and left the polling place, take a couple of pieces of tape, masking tape, whatever, something that can be seen, and just put a little T on the front of your clothing. And if every Trump voter does that, it's going to make it very, very obvious if the official results are shifting toward Hillary Clinton. It's simple, it's direct, everybody can do it, it's only going to cost them a couple of pieces of tape, and I'm going to be pushing this idea throughout all of October. Okay, we're going to start with Frank in Pennsylvania, but Frank, I'm probably going to have to take you through the station identification. What's on your mind?
Okay, Michael, thank you for taking my call. Just touching on the economy, I see that they had the unemployment numbers come out, and they said it was like 4.9%. And I'm like, wow, we are swimming in such propaganda, because if you look at the GDP of the United States,
it's pretty bad. Frank, got to put you on hold. Frank, got to put you on hold. Hold that thought. As soon as we're coming back from the station identification, we're going to go right back onto this topic. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking with Frank in Pennsylvania. Frank, take it away.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much again. And I was just reflecting on the GDP versus the unemployment numbers. And if you look at the GDP, which basically shows more people are borrowing money, spending in the economy, it's pretty much anemic. It's literally in negative territory. And then they're telling us that the unemployment rate's only like 4.9%. Now, if all these people were working, we would have a much higher GDP. We are swimming in such propaganda, and it's become to the point where these, economists that support the Hillary Clinton agenda are slick-talking us to believe in that, no, it's not the truth, things are really much better than what they seem. They are not. They are not. Now, my part of the country I live in, it is devastated.
Yes.
I mean, it is to the point where I know people putting in for dollar store jobs, that were working at manufacturing, lost their position, and the dollar store jobs aren't even hiring. They're advertising these jobs. People are not working. It's gotten to the point where it's so sad. We are actually on a decline in this country, and I think that it is shown by the rallies that Trump is getting at his events. He's coming over to PA, and he's going to give a rally. He's going to fill that arena because people want to work. People want to work regardless of what race, what creed, what color. They keep on saying the white angry man is because they lost their jobs. No, it's also the black angry man and the Hispanic angry man and the Asian angry man that lost their jobs to this economy. They want to work. They want to have jobs and better their lot in life, Michael. And that's what's really going on. The mainstream media just doesn't understand this, Mike.
Well, there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. Yes, we're being fed a bunch of lies. We're being mushroomed, kept in the dark, and fed on refuse. And the reality is, right now, and even CNN reported on this at one point, and then they were told to please kindly shut up about it, there are roughly 94 million legal American citizens willing and able to work in this country out of a population of 320 million total, not counting the illegal immigrants and the refugees. Now, that tells you that this 4 to 5% number has to be a complete joke. And the way they come up with that without simply saying we're just making it up is people who have been out of work for more than a few months are put in a separate category that nobody wants to look at. The 4%, 5% unemployment number is simply people who lost their jobs within the last few weeks and who are still on unemployment benefits. That's it. That's how they cook the books. And you're absolutely right. This economy is terrible for the ordinary American. In fact, it's a worse condition than it was back in the Depression of the 1930s in terms of just how many Americans are out of work right now. And they're trying to puff it up and make it look good so the incumbents can win their re-elections in November. But the other part of it is this New World Order global agenda requires every nation's economy to be driven down to the same low level that we see in countries like Brazil, so that when they do drop the borders, there won't be this mass flooding of people back and forth out of control. And our current political elites are on board with this New World Order agenda because they all dream of a shot at that golden throne of planet Earth. And Trump is right. We've got to take care of the United States of America. The American people, generation after generation after generation, built this nation up to be a manufacturing powerhouse, an agricultural source to the world, and it's all been taken away from us through these political machinations and corruption and just out-of-control cronyism. And we don't want to be part of a New World Order global government. It's being shoved down our throat. And you would think from what's going on in Europe right now that they would understand this is a failed policy and a failed agenda. But, all of these people on Wall Street who are getting insanely wealthy, they understand. As they get richer, it means other people must be poorer. In fact, no matter how much money they have, they can't feel rich unless they can look out the windows of their ivory towers down on the ground and see lots and lots of homeless, starving Americans. That's how psychotic this money junkie fever actually is. Again, everything coming out from the government is total bovine excrement, whether it's the unemployment numbers, global warming, the success against ISIS, all of it. Truth has become such a valuable commodity, our government is economizing on it. There's hardly anything that you can trust coming out of the corporate media except the sports scores and the weather report, and they're not even all that good on the weather report.
No, that's an excellent point, Mike. And then the slap in the face to the everyday Americans is when you stated earlier on your show that we're giving $50 billion to the state of Israel. And you think what $50 billion can do in the United States for the people that are working.
Yes.
$50 billion can pave almost 5,000 miles of road. Yeah, out of $1 million a mile. Just think about that, Mike.
Okay, well,
that money could be spent.
I've got one better for you, but first we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network here, and we're talking about the economy here in the United States of America. Even over and above all this money being sent by the U.S. government to Israel or used to prop up Wall Street, let's look at the Pentagon. Yet again, they have come up literally misplacing trillions of dollars. They don't know where it went. What could we do with this country for the civilian population with $6 trillion? New schools, new hospitals. Well, we could write a check to everybody so that they could get caught up on their mortgage. I mean, everything the U.S. government did since the meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud in 2008 was exactly 180 degrees wrong from what would have worked. If they had simply gone to these crooked Wall Street firms and said, we're going to take trillions of dollars away from you and distribute it among the American people, nobody would have missed a mortgage payment. There would have been a mortgage meltdown. Nobody would have missed a car payment. People could have gone out and bought new American-made cars. There wouldn't have been a need for the auto bailout. People would have money to go to the shopping malls. There wouldn't be a retail crisis. But because Washington, D.C. has become a fascist economic dictatorship, and they're firmly on board with the bankers, their solution was to take trillions of dollars away from the American people and give it to the bankers so the bankers could loan it back to the American people at interest, which is all a bailout is. Stealing your money, giving it to the banks so that you have to go to the banks and borrow it back at interest to maintain that debt slavery.
Excellent points. You're absolutely correct. And just think how many people's lives lots would have been better if you would have went with your plan. And I agree. And Trump is correct. And the more he talks about the issues, the larger his crowds get, the more the mainstream media seems to attack him. But it's not working this time, Michael, because I think your show and other shows like yours that are telling the people the truth is what's really going on. And that's the people who are tuning into your program. And the vast majority of Americans, I think, agree with your opinions and the administration's opinions, Michael. And thank you so much for taking my call.
Well, thank you very much for the call, and we're going to let you go here. There is one other factor to keep in mind. We know the government wants to disarm the American people to prevent opposition to oligarchy, but you need to understand money is also seen as a weapon. And throughout history, opposition to oligarchy, revolution, has always arisen from the middle class who have the money to support resistance to oligarchs. During the French Revolution, it was the middle class from which the revolution emerged. In the early United States of America, it was the middle class from which the revolution began. And so for any dictator or tyrant getting rid of that middle class, stripping everybody of their wealth, making them so poor that they can barely feed themselves, let alone stand up against their oppressors. That's always part of the plan. When the Soviet Union was being set up, they created a system in which, by design, there never was a middle class. And that's why the Soviet Union, despite all of its failings, persisted as long as it did. The destruction of the American middle class's wealth is part of the design to keep us helpless in the face of a government that has just gone completely towards oligarchy. And that money is actually a more potent weapon than any firearms we might have. The only thing they can't seem to find a way to strip from us just yet is our ability to communicate with each other through vast numbers. And they're probably working on that as well. Because this revolution, as I told somebody the other day who was advocating for blood in the streets, said we don't need to do that. This revolution will not be fought with guns and bombs. It'll be fought with keyboards and information. And it is. And we are gaining. All right, one more phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I can't agree enough with you about that point. They want us poor so we can't resist. And the T for Trump, that's awesome because you don't have to buy anything. Mm-hmm. That could go viral. So I want that to go viral. That's so awesome. I got like 5 really quick things if we got time.
Sure.
Regarding Trump's Second Amendment supposed threat about Hillary, stopping Hillary from taking the guns, I just wanted to mention that the mainstream media, the old dinosaur dying media, I should say, is very disingenuous here. And what they're saying is they're making it sound like Trump wants an armed uprising to stop Hillary from picking judges. But no, that's not what he was saying. He was saying that maybe only an armed population could stop a gun grab.
No, he wasn't even saying that. He wasn't even saying that. If you actually look at what he said, it's easy to basically say that what he meant was that the Second Amendment supporters politically oppose the Supreme Court's attempt to change the Second Amendment. He was talking about the NRA, whose political clout and lobbying power is legendary. And that's not a nonviolent suggestion at all. But the media is out there saying, oh, he's calling for assassination. But then if you remember back during the primary season where there were all these articles in the corporate media about what a great thing it would be if somebody would just kill Donald Trump. And nobody made a stink about that. And the bias of the media is fully on display. And that's actually a good thing because, I mean, everybody I'm talking to, they're just saying they can't believe how openly biased the media is to shove Hillary down our throats. They're seeing Donald Trump as a victim of the establishment, and they identify with him because most people walking around this country are feeling they too are victims of this establishment. And that is really at the heart of Trump's exploding support.
Yeah, and for the people that say that the reason Trump's popular is because we're all a bunch of racist people, isn't it obvious that we're not racist, and the proof is that we elected Obama twice?
Yes. But they're not going to mention that.
That's ridiculous.
No, what they're trying to do is figure out a way to get Trump's supporters to stop supporting him, saying, oh, if you're a Trump supporter, then you're a tool of Russia. If you're a Trump supporter, you're a racist. If you're a Trump supporter, you hate Mexicans. If you're a Trump... And then, of course, they had all these hoax stories. Oh, Trump is going to quit anyway. They had one early today on the media. Trump is already talking about he's going to lose to Hillary. And the goal of all of that is to convince Trump's supporters not to even bother showing up at the election in November because it's a pointless exercise in futility. It's a total waste of time. He's going to lose, and you just might as well stay at home and, watch CNN or something like that. And it's not working. They're not getting traction. Because the American people have come to understand the corporate media is the enemy. The corporate media is the ministry of propaganda for the establishment, which has destroyed the American standard of living, not to mention the standing of the United States as a whole as seen around the world.
I don't think they're going to be able to pull off rigging it enough. We're just going to overwhelm the voting. I think it's going to be like a
the Brexit.
I was going to say 80%, but when you really factor it all in, I think the actual number is probably like 65%. And that includes all the brainwashed people that don't have any idea what's going on, including everybody. It's probably 65% of the USA that are voters that want Trump right now. And of the educated voters, it's probably like 80%.
Well, on the polls that are held on websites not connected with the corporate media, Trump is enjoying a landslide victory. When we hold polls here, he's above 90%. Other places, it's 60 to 70%. There's no question he is favored by the American people. The establishment's problem is how to steal the election for Hillary or how to get rid of Donald Trump in a way that doesn't trigger an actual armed revolution. And this is probably the one thing we can all agree on. I don't want to see an armed revolution in the streets of the United States of America because the wrong people get killed and crippled in these things. But we do have to bring about a peaceful revolution in this country, or we're going to find ourselves in a new world war, and it's going to go nuclear. And the only people who win a nuclear war are the bankers, because they've loaned us the money at interest to build the nuclear bombs, and they'll be very happy to loan us the money at interest to rebuild our world after it's been blown to bits.
Speaking of nuclear, that brings me to my other point regarding the nuke codes.
Yes.
In the football. I've got this idea. What do you think? Is it possible that because of the fact that the presidents are puppets for the most part, what's the chance that they don't actually have the right codes in that football, that the codes that if they are a puppet, you wouldn't want to let your puppet have that much power? I bet you if Obama tried to launch a nuke, he would find out at the last second it's not the right code.
Well, that's kind of an interesting idea, but I do think that the president, there's a specific group, the National Command Authority, that is in theory in charge of the nuclear release. The president is obviously the top guy there. We do have a supposed safeguard called the two-man rule, which is that the strategic forces, the nuclear forces, will not accept a command to launch a nuclear attack from the president unless it is seconded by somebody else who's in that National Command Authority, which would be the Vice President, the Secretary of State. I think the Speaker of the House is in there as well. It's a very, very small group, and they've all got those little plastic cards with their code numbers on there. In theory, if the U.S. is attacked with a nuke, the president can launch on his own. But certainly, I would hope that if the president just went totally crazy, like let's say Hillary gets elected and she suffers another stroke and she hallucinates Russia's attacking and she orders up a nuclear strike, that one of the National Command Authority people around her would say, Hillary, you're listening to the voices in your head again. We're going to take away your little plastic card and we're not going to melt the earth down into slag just today.
Yeah, according to this creative theory, we might have actually already had a few World War III nuclear holocausts that were prevented. Like we might have had Netanyahu already launch once, and we might have had like Bush launched once or something, and then they find out that they don't work. Maybe that's why.
No. There have been some near misses. There have been some near misses. There was that bomb they accidentally dropped in the water off Savannah, Georgia. They've never found that one. They lost 6 nukes into the Mediterranean. Do you remember the movie War Games? Matthew Broderick's one of his earliest films.
Old movie.
Old movie.
A long time ago.
That was actually based on a true story. And that was where they were running an exercise at Cheyenne Mountain. They fed a simulation into the battle control system, but they didn't mention that it was a simulation, and they literally got to the point of getting ready to release Armageddon on Russia when finally somebody realized they'd made a mistake. Now, when they made the movie, they shifted the blame from mistake inside Strategic Air Command to kid with a computer hacks in from the outside and launches this artificially intelligent system that doesn't listen to anybody until he's defeated in tic-tac-toe. And it's certainly an interesting movie. And by the way, the real Strategic Command Center in Cheyenne Mountain never looked as good as the movie set. In fact, little story here. When I worked for Robert Abel and Associates toward the last part of its existence, they spun off an industrial division for computer animation, and we actually got contracted by Martin Marietta to help them set up a demonstration for the battle management system for the Strategic Defense Initiative. And we all had to have security clearances and all the rest of that. And we actually hired the set designer from War Games to come in and design the set that we were going to build to simulate the battle management system Martin Marietta was proposing to Congress. Congress went with somebody else afterwards, but it was an interesting experience to go through. Okay? We got.
It sounds like you had a fun work background history. You've been working on all sorts of interesting things with NASA and with Hollywood.
It's been colorful. Other people would simply say he can't hold on to a job for more than 4 or 5 years. We got to take a break for the commercial. Thank you, Mateus, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I can't believe it. I was just thinking about it. I told my wife, I said, you know, I watched Putin give one of his talks there with the press, talking about how just really he's just like, hey, you guys are idiots. These people running your government are trying to, they're poking the bear. You guys need to back off. He's screaming. Nobody's listening. And I couldn't help but think of the general from War Games where he said, I'd piss on a spark plug if I thought that would help. And I would. I remember that one.
Yeah, well, it's weird. You know what really weirds me out about these people? They actually think nuclear war is winnable. And at the end of World War II, when the U.S. was the only one with nuclear weapons and they only used 2 of them, yeah, we could all pretty much survive. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki were rebuilt. They're beautiful cities. But I keep thinking about that movie On the Beach, which was created from a novel. And the director really pushed hard to get this made into a movie, not because he thought it was going to make a lot of money, but because he said, we have to start getting people thinking about the possibility that these bombs are so big and there's so many of them that we could exterminate ourselves. And it is ridiculous. It's shocking to think that we have all of these money junkies who are willing to risk the incineration of the surface of planet Earth and the extinction of humanity in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're all going to be using for the next 100 years. I mean, to me, that's a symptom of insanity right there.
Well, you know, Michael, like you always said, all wars are bankers' wars. It all leads back to the fiat money system, the predator interest rate, well, I shouldn't say interest rate, but you know what I'm talking about with the Federal Reserve. So, you know, it gets back to gold. Now people are starting to come on, different radio shows and whatever, talking about confiscating gold. Where do you think that's going to go? Because that's the end result. Gold is money.
Well, I think the reason why the U.S. might be pushed to confiscate gold has more to do with the fact that the Federal Reserve and gold bullion vaults like J.P. Morgan have been caught playing fast and loose with other people's gold. And it's led to a rash of calls by other governments to repatriate the gold that's on deposit there. Germany was not able to get their gold back. They got none of their original gold bars back. They got some gold bars back of lesser purity. And at some point, if there is a gold run, the U.S., they're going to turn to the American people and say, turn in your gold. And because there's a lot of it out there in the hands of the American people. Roosevelt did it in 1933. But I think they're seriously going to have to confiscate all the firearms first, or they're going to run into trouble when they break into people's homes and try and grab those gold coins.
Hey, Michael, I just thought of a good one. You know, the alchemist was going to turn lead into gold. Well, when they come take my gold, I'll tell them I'm turning this lead into gold.
Yeah. Well, you can turn lead into gold, but it costs so much money, it's just not really worth it.
No, but I mean, come get my metal, come get my lead.
Yes.
That's all you're going to get.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. Hello? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm hearing these weird sounds on the phone connections today, these beeps and everything. Maybe the FBI is recording our phone calls so they can come back and say, why are you saying bad things about Hillary Clinton and why are you saying bad things about the FBI? Well, because you deserve it. That's why.
It took me a long time to get through.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get on.
Really?
I thought, this is one day I'm not going to be able to hear Mike. And finally, after 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I got on.
Okay. That's kind of interesting because, I mean, I did have 2 calls before you. It shouldn't have been all that long a wait.
No. This was like from 4 to 4:15.
Okay. Were you getting a ring?
Eastern time.
Okay. All right. Listen, we'll let our board operator take a look at the issue. There have been a lot of technical problems. There's certainly a lot of interference going on with attacks on my server, attacks on the podcast server. Somebody's been trying to break in and disrupt the BAM user feed. Like I said, the other side loves to play dirty. Mo, we're going to let you go.
Attacks on the truth. Attacks on the truth.
Yeah, that definitely is what it is, a war on the truth by the U.S. government. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Michael in Ireland. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Yes, I first had one little simple question, which I'll ask. But the main question would be about gold. But you said on another broadcast that during the Civil War, the Confederacy had a different flag from the stars and the bars. What was that flag like?
You'd have to probably do a Google search on that. I remember finding it once, and it was actually quite ornate and convoluted, and would have been very difficult and costly to reproduce. And in the era where Hollywood started making that flag that we associate with the Confederacy, they didn't have the big budget for movies that they do today. But that's really the origin of that. And it did exist as a naval ensign for the Confederacy, but that's all it was. It was never the flag of the Confederacy itself. But today it's basically understood that it's the flag of the Confederacy, and everybody's trying to ban it. It's racist and slavery and everything. So they're getting their knickers in a twist over an historical mistake, and that's just how embarrassing the whole matter is.
Did they use this other flag a lot? If it was complicated, it'd be hard for them to make it, wouldn't it? I mean, on the battlefield, they must have had a standard then to have flags.
They had battle standards, and they were in all different kinds, just like in America's military. Each military unit has their own particular unit flag. But you can find the real flag of the Confederacy in a Google search. But it's that one that we think of as the flag of the Confederacy, the one that Al Gore and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have used in the past in their campaign literature. That actually is something that was put forward as the flag of the Confederacy by Hollywood. Okay?
Yeah, and the other question, you talked about gold, and you think sooner or later they will try to recall all the gold in the U.S. How will they do that, and will the people give into it? During the Depression, when they did it, a lot of people gave in. That I would think a lot of people would refuse. Would they come force their way in houses and collect the gold, or what do you think?
Well, I imagine if you've got like maybe a coin or two, it's probably not worth the effort. When Roosevelt did it in 1933, he did have the support of the American people, and they turned their gold in exchange for paper money, which rapidly began to lose its value. Today, I think it would be very different. I think most people understand that the U.S. paper money is very untrustworthy. It does not hold its value, especially with all this quantitative easing and inflation going on. And I think probably most people would refuse. Now, for large purchases of gold, the government has been keeping a record for many, many years. So they know who's got large amounts of gold. For people who've been buying one coin at a time here and there, they're probably off the record. But at some point, yeah, they're going to put out the call. But I don't think most Americans are going to surrender their gold voluntarily because the paper money they're going to be given in exchange for it will not hold its value. And everybody understands gold does hold its value. It's an intrinsic holder of wealth and wealth preservation. And I think people are just going to hang on to it. Right now, the American people do not support this government. They have no faith in this government. They're not just going to just blindly obey an order to surrender what economic safety they've tried to build for themselves.
What about silver? Will they try to collect silver?
They might. They might.
And could this be done internationally? Would it be in other countries too?
That would be up to those other countries. Right now, the United States is dealing with a serious gold shortfall in the New York Federal Reserve. Private bullion centers like J.P. Morgan, certainly Fort Knox. They haven't had an audit down there in 50 years. Back in the, I think it was the late 70s when there was a question about the gold in Fort Knox, they opened the door to one vault and there were some bars stacked there, but nobody was allowed to touch them or test them.
And what about a metal like platinum?
Could be. Anything that is a store of value or worth is definitely, going to be up for grabs when the government starts plundering the people. And they're already doing it through civil forfeiture. Anything that of value, they're just going to grab it. The United States has declined into the same state as England in the time of Robin Hood, where Sir Guy of Gisborne's thugs are just striding across the country land, grabbing pigs and chickens and farmers' daughters whenever they feel like it. There's a huge new scandal coming on out from the Drug Enforcement Administration. Apparently, they have been profiling American travelers and seizing their money on the basis of some arbitrary definition of potential suspicion of drug activity. And in 10 years, U.S. DEA agents have seized nearly $210 million from 5,200 Americans at airports and Amtrak train stations. This was in USA Today. Only 2 people turned out to be real suspects. So, yeah, the government is already grabbing the wealth of the American people. Civil forfeiture, the Bureau of Land Management stealing private land under all these various excuses. Yeah, this government is already at the point of literally plundering the wealth of the people just to perpetuate itself a little longer.
Well, how could the American people fight against that with computers? I mean, you said that might be the means of fighting. I don't see how that would do much good.
Well, it does good in, as I said before, Roosevelt was able to get away with the gold confiscation because the American people supported him, believed in him, thought he was making the best decision for the country as a whole. Today, because of the independent media and the Internet, the American people don't have that naive, blind trust in the government. They're going to see a demand to surrender gold as just another device to loot the American people for the benefit of the bankers. Okay?
And if they did that, what would what if they looted it on a grand scale? What would happen then?
That is something that only time is going to tell us. Like I said, I think most people are going to try and find ways to resist. They're going to try and hide their gold, silver, and platinum, try and claim it, well, I sold this off a while ago, or my house was broken into and all my gold was stolen, and any manner of means to protect what's their property from government seizure under color of law. Anyway, Michael, I need to let you go. We're running out of time, and I got a couple more calls I need to get to. So we're going to switch over to John in Ohio. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, it's about that gold issue. I doubt if they'd be able to do that. The world is becoming more aware of the value of gold. It's become the real money.
Mm-hmm.
They might nationalize the mines or something in that order. But for them to go out and confiscate it, there's only about approximately 1.5% of the population at this time, sir, that owns any precious gold or metals. So that would
we
be
all have wedding rings
for them. Yeah, well, that's
you can have my wedding ring when you pry it from my cold dead finger.
I wish more people would recognize that, but that's just it. They don't, Mike. Anyhow, getting back to that, I really don't think, even China, they've opened up, they're encouraging their citizens to own gold and silver. So, I mean, we'll be beating a dead horse there if we try to go after that gold. I mean, we'll be like India. The more bootleggers will bring in gold than the government buys. That's just my take on it, Mike. I could be wrong.
No, you could be very, no, you could be right. When the gold starts being grabbed, there'll be smugglers, there'll be bootleggers. There's always going to be somebody who's going to want to, do that thing. And you're absolutely right. China is actually one of the world's leading producers of gold, but they can't keep up with their consumer demand.
Number one now.
They're starting to import from Russia now.
Exactly right. There was a shortfall because so many people are going after it. At one time, they were the only game in town. They were important more than any other country. But other companies have heeded the call now. They realize what's going on. The petrodollar's dying, and it's really in a spin now, and more people are aware of it. We're the ones that are backward. 1.5% Asians, it's anybody that can afford it, that's what they buy. The Indians, same thing, sir. The Pakis, same thing, sir.
Well, everybody is, because ultimately, you know, when this private central bank cartel, this debt slave system that has held us all in bondage for 300 years, when it comes crashing down, these pieces of ink and paper are going to be absolutely worthless. You can use them as toilet tissue. That's all they're going to be worth. There's no intrinsic value to those paper notes.
Even Big Al Green Scam, I call him Green Scam. Big Al, he was a gold bug initially. He wrote a thesis on gold.
Yes.
And of course, he rolled over when he took the position with the Fed. But I mean, people
and now that he's out of the Fed, he's back to being a supporter of gold.
Exactly. Isn't that ironic? Isn't that maybe he hears a grave whistling at him or something? I don't know what it's about, but it's amazing what the times we're living in. But I'm not worried about him coming after the metals, the people that already have it. They'll nationalize the mines like South America's doing presently, and we'll follow suit. And they'll tax everybody, anybody that has it. Now that we're going paperless as far as our money, they'll tax the heck out of it, you know, as a capital gain, and they'll just rip you off that way.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you. Keep up the good work. You're a blessing. You're a blessing to this country, and I'm sincere when I say that.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind words, and thank you for the phone call. And we're going to let you go because we're going to switch over to Ed in Florida. Aloha, Ed. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, I just wanted to make a couple comments about the Confederate flag. The one that people mostly think is the Southern Cross, which they used from 1861 onwards. That was, you know, the 12 stars sewn on a white field. You had that, like if you look at the upper left-hand portion, it was just that sewn onto a white field. Then at the end of the war, in March of 65, they kept the same design but added a red bar in the fly end. So they did have the Confederate battle flag, if you want to call it that, as their official flags from 1863 on to 1865.
Okay, well, I'll have to look at that issue again, but yeah.
They're also known as, you know, the first Confederate National, second Confederate National, third Confederate National. Those are the three flags that were recognized by the Confederate government. Okay, not battle flag, which was a naval ensign flag, as you said.
Yeah.
But not, I mean, that was hijacked by, I guess, the white supremacists during the civil rights era.
Okay, now, there I got to put you on hold because, you know, when they were out there talking about this person is associated with the KKK and the Confederacy and racism, I found in a web search a dozen photos of the KKK in their white robes marching in their protests carrying the American flag, not the Confederate flag. So I think
it was the Democratic Party that actually established the Ku Klux Klan, and they did ride around in white hoods waving the American flag.
Well, you know, that's a big part of this film that's out, Hillary's America, which I've got to go see. It's apparently playing down at the Dole Cannery Theaters. And so we'll look at that. Anyway, Ed, thank you for the update. I need to let you go. We're going to switch. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Alex in San Antonio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling to... Yes, hi. Aloha, Mike. I was calling because I have a couple of questions. First one is regarding the whole socialist and all this other stuff, way that governments function. And I was wondering something. How come no one ever brings up Tito's Yugoslavia as a model for, how could I put it to you, a socialist and a capitalist environment that worked very well because the figurehead of Tito allowed there to have some type of balance, you know. And my thing is, and when we're talking about that, we look at what's going on with Ukraine and Crimea, and I'm thinking, well, you know, when the Slovenia and Croatia decided to break off from Yugoslavia, they supported that. It wasn't. They wanted to support the independence of Slovenia and Slovakia. I guess it was because they wanted to break up Yugoslavia because it was an economic engine for Europe?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. Anytime they go in and they'll break up countries that represent a threat to the established order. And we're in a part of history where we're dealing with an interesting paradigm shift because in history, wars were about control of land, and today it is about control of economies to the point where the lines on the maps don't matter anymore. And that's a very subtle change, but you need to understand that, again, that's what's driving the American wars. The United States absolutely has no intention of invading Russia and planting the American flag in the middle of Red Square. It's all about control of the economies, because the economies are where the wealth of nations resides, whereas as late as World War II, the land they controlled, the physical resources, represented the wealth of the nations.
So basically, without Yugoslavia's economic prowess, the euro was free to roam, is what you're trying to explain to me.
Well, it was less about Yugoslavia. I mean, the euro came in with the European Union when they tried to pull all of that together. And let me back up and make an observation, because we're almost at the commercial break. Whether a system is capitalist or socialist, it's only as workable, it's only as good or bad as the leaders who are controlling it. If you have leaders that are sincerely interested in making life better for the people and the nation to secure their place in the history book, you're going to have a system that works, like you did under Tito. If you have a system, whether it's capitalist or socialist or fascist, that is in the control of people whose only agenda is wealth and power for themselves, it's going to be a terrible system, whether it's capitalism, socialism, or fascism. It really comes down to the people as to whether the system is going to work or not. There is no magic system out there that guarantees the wealth and freedom of the ordinary people, because, again, the curse of political power is it attracts the very sort of people who shouldn't be allowed to have it. The Founding Fathers developed probably what is the closest to perfect system for a republic with democratic rule, but over time it's been eroded and decayed by the money junkies and the war hawks and the power freaks. Okay?
Yes, no, I understand, Mike. And just to finalize the question is, do you think that Donald Trump will adopt something like this, being that he speaks on platforms that are both socially about social welfare, not welfare in the sense of giving us money.
Okay, I got to cut you off. I got to cut you off. We're on a commercial break. Trump, I think, is going to lean back toward capitalism. We already know that Hillary is purely into fascism, and will continue that policy. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our program today. Last segment of this Thursday show here. And apparently in the discussions between Turkish President Erdogan and Vladimir Putin, one of the points they're agreeing on is to drop use of the U.S. dollar in trade between Turkey and Russia and do all the trade directly in lira and rubles. And they're saying this would benefit both Russia and Turkey, and yes, it would, because they wouldn't be paying interest and charges and everything to the Federal Reserve. And so Turkey is now probably competing with Russia to be at the top of the U.S. government's special high interest targets list. Now, as you know, the allegation that Seth Rich was the leak from inside the Democratic National Committee of those emails that WikiLeaks released has created a huge furor. Yesterday, the U.S. government came on out and said, we have found absolutely no indications that Seth Rich had anything to do with the leak, and there's no connection with his death. He was robbed, and yes, they were stupid robbers because they didn't take his wallet, his watch, or his cell phone. But, you know, in Washington, D.C., the robbers are just as dumb as the politicians, so you will just believe as we tell you to believe. And now the Seth Rich family has been cut off from all access to the media. There is now a family spokesman, an official family spokesman who will speak to the media on behalf of the Seth Rich family. He is a known Democrat crisis consultant. He's a spin doctor. WikiLeaks just came out with that one. He's not there to take care of the Seth Rich family. He is there to try and keep the lid on yet another political assassination. And one more point, okay? Anybody who understands crime understands that robbers and muggers are going to be out on the streets the same time the people are. At 4 o'clock in the morning, everybody has gone home, including the robbers and muggers. So the official story just does not withstand any kind of examination whatsoever. Over in France, where they're dealing with this refugee immigrant crisis, the French government is now demanding their citizens to accept refugees into their homes. Look, you can put a cot down there in the basement. You got to take one of these refugees. It really is out of control over there, and they're just pushing this agenda to blur all the world's people together in order to destroy their sense of identity, their sense of self. And that is a very common tactic when you're taking over somebody else's country. Whether it's insisting the Native Americans dress in Western clothing, punish them for speaking their native language, demand they learn English. It's all about destroying their own sense of identity to make them easier to control. And that's what all this illegal immigrant and refugee nonsense is about. To try and get us to forget that we're Americans. To get the French to forget they're French. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. The Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our broadcast tomorrow. So a reminder, everybody listening to this broadcast is now part of the independent media. You've got to take what you learn. You've got to get it on out there to your friends, family, coworkers, social media. There are hundreds of millions of American citizens, and working together, we can overcome the corporate media propaganda machine. So have yourself a good evening. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.